Welcome to my YouTube channel, Surowicz Watercolor. At any time during the video, you can click on the link in the lower right hand corner to subscribe to my channel. If you want to learn more about my videos or my online instruction, you can click on one of the boxes that appears at the end of the video. Hi, this is Rick. Welcome to my studio. One of the things I get asked quite often about are the materials I use in my setup in my studio. I have a short studio tour video on my website that's on the studio page of my website. But I thought I'd do just a short video with a little bit more detail about my workspace and how I set that up. And in particular the workspace that I paint in. So if you look to my right, there's a table here. And this is where I have a lot of my materials. It's a side table. We'll take a look at that now. Basically what's on my side table, like I said, it's just to the right here. This is how I work. I'm right-handed. I have some things to the right and I have some things to the left. I'm fortunate to have a nice workspace here to arrange this in. But if you look on my side table, this is where I have my paints, my palette, containers of water, spray bottles, paint brushes, and things like that. So just real quick, this is a porcelain palette that I like to use, and fairly deep wells, and these are the mixing areas that I work in. I like the porcelain because it cleans up nicely, and when you're floating a puddle of paint on here, it doesn't beat up like some of the plastic palettes do. And I enjoy working on that in the studio. It doesn't work too well outside because it's very breakable. But that's where I have my palette. I have two large containers of water. They're probably close to 1 quart containers. And on one I use for dirty water, and the other one I use for clean water. So I'm not sure if you can see that, but they're fairly full. And I always have plenty of water. If my water gets too dirty, I just stop, I empty it and put in fresh water. I don't try and stretch out dirty water for any reason. Right beside my palette, right here, I have a cloth. These are just kind of like a shop rag that I get. And I get like a box of 100 of these. And they're fairly inexpensive. And I fold them over and I flip them back and forth and I open them up. I try to use all the sides. And eventually I just get rid of it. I don't want to put it. You can put it on a wash or a sink or something, I guess, if you wanted to get more concerned about the paint. But they're fairly inexpensive, and I just dispose of them. So what I use that for is to control my moisture in my brush for the most part. So when I dip my brush in my water and come to my palette, I'll rinse my brush off, which actually has a little bit of paint in it. But once I load my brush, if I don't want a full bead, I'll touch it to my cloth to lose some of that. Sometimes I use tissue, but I have that here. And if I rinse it off, take some of the water out of it. That's what I use it here. I used to use a sponge, but I prefer the cloth. So I have that there, my palette, my water, this cloth. I have a couple spray bottles. I have two. These are fine mist spray bottles, same bottle. And I just have two in case one gets low. I just grab the other one. And I use that for a variety of techniques. I have this spray bottle, which is a little coarser spray. I use that for some different things. I have this little oiler bottle that I have water in. And what I use that for is when I want to squeeze a little bit of water onto my paint. If one's getting a little dry, I'll squeeze a half teaspoon or a teaspoon of water on top of it. I let that soak in. I like to keep my paints fairly soft and creamy, almost like a tube consistency, but it gets a little kind of a little crusty around the edges, and that's how I like to keep my palette. But I have this here in case I need to squeeze a little water in one. Sometimes I'll spray some water. If I'm painting for a while, I have my palette, the lid off my palette. Occasionally I'll spray it with this to keep my paints moist. Here's a scraping tool that I like to use. Works pretty well, and I just keep it here on the side table. And I use these little magic eraser foam sponges sometimes to lift off, and I keep those here on my table. And then I have my assortment of brushes. And I normally, just because I like to keep things organized, I normally have my smaller brushes here, my larger brushes here, and kind of specialty brushes off to the side. And I have multiples of some of these brushes. If I'm working with different colors, there may be conflicting complementary colors that I don't want to get mixed and get grayed down, I might just work with one brush for the warm color and another brush for a cool color, or one complement versus the other. So normally it's my 1-inch flat brush I have 2 of, my round wash brush I have 2 of, my 1/2-inch flat brush I have 2 of, and then I have a few number 4 brushes. They have, the points are, some are, one's a little sharper than the other, one is a little worn, and they both serve a purpose for me. A couple other round brushes here, a 6 and an 8, but that's what I like to work with. So that's what I have going on the right side. And some people don't like to reach like that, and I can understand that. It works out well for me. My palette's right here. I don't like to have it up in front of me. So that's kind of what I have going on the right of me. And if we go in front of me, so I have my side table here, and then here, and I'm going to make that image a little bigger. So right here in front of me, I have where I paint, and this is a piece of gator board. It's a 1/2-inch thick, and the size I work with is 16 by 21. Gives me an inch around the edge for a half sheet, or actually it's 16 by 23. It gives me an inch around the edge for a half sheet, but I generally work on quarter sheets or full sheets. So I have larger ones of these that'll accommodate a full sheet. They're 23 by 31 inches. But gator board is fairly light. It remains a nice flat. It doesn't warp, and so I like to work on these. And I prop it up with this foam pad that I get asked about a lot. It's kind of worn, and it was originally a laptop lap desk. They don't make them anymore, as far as I can tell. It props my board up. I work on a drafting table, and although the table tilts, the table's not tilted. I use the block. It's all flat because I have some other things here. I have a mouse, I have a microphone, I have some things clamped to the table, and it wouldn't work for me to have it tilted. But I like to be able to adjust it with the block anyhow. Sometimes I want it a little higher, sometimes I want it a little lower. And these blocks, somebody that recently brought to my attention, you can get these kind of stress wedges. There's different ones out there, but I haven't tested this one out yet. But you can slide it underneath the board this way, and it props it up. This way, it doesn't quite get it high enough, but some are a little thicker here at the front of it. But I use that type of thing to prop my board up at an angle. And also here on my drawing table in front of me, I have a couple erasers, a mechanical pencil that's a B lead, a regular pencil, and a waterproof pen that I use in my sketchbook. So those are all as handy right in front of me on my drawing table. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is on my left side. I have some other materials and equipment that I use. So let's take a look at that. All right, welcome to my left side of my workspace. And I've had to make a few adjustments here because I don't normally have a camera sitting on this. But I wanted to show you what I have here. So right here I have a heat gun. I've recently started using this in the last many months. Occasionally. I use it primarily if I want to dry a small area and I'm doing a live class and I want to be able to still talk. But for the most part, I use a hairdryer, and I use that frequently throughout my painting process to dry my paper so that I can work wet on dry when I want. So I have that here handy. As we move here, I'm going to move my camera a little bit. So right here, I have some masking fluid in fine line bottles and a little wider bottle. And I have a jar that I'll dip a toothbrush in occasionally. And this is something I don't use that too often. It's one of those nibs. Sometimes I'll use this to squeeze a bead of masking fluid out, and I'll use the rubber tip of this to move it around and fill an area. Not too often. I don't normally do that. I have these little knives here. These are for cutting frisket. So if I'm going to use a plastic frisket and mask an area, I'll use these knives to cut them. And this is a pickup eraser that I use when I'm using masking fluid to remove the dry masking fluid. Back here I have fine and a coarse salt. I don't use it a lot, but occasionally it's a technique that I'll use. And then if we move a little bit more this way, I have some, these are various types of rice tape that I'll use these to mask some areas or protect an edge or something while I paint. I use this clear packing tape occasionally for a frisket. And then here's masking tape, plain masking tape. This is drafting tape. It seals pretty good. I like the rice tape to mask areas that are small edges I'm trying to protect. Then here, this is a dry cleaning pad. And I need to go a little bit more this way. So this dry cleaning pad, I'll use to take some of the excess graphite off my drawing or lighten my pencil drawing before I paint. And I'll just use this to dust the particles from this off. Here I have a few straight edges that I'll use occasionally. Pencil sharpener for my regular pencil, and a pair of scissors. So that's kind of a lower shelf that I have here. And if we go up just a little bit, let's see if we can do that. I keep a box of tissue handy because I use that when I paint. I normally have a color wheel and a value scale. And this is a 3D representation of color that I use. And the other thing that I have is I keep handy is a sketchbook. And I'll use this with my waterproof pen to do some thumbnail sketches or studies in a sketchbook. So I have that handy. So that's a look at what I have going on this side. So that's my workspace and a little bit more detail, in particular the workspace that I use to paint in. I do other, this is my studio. There's other tasks that I perform in here, and I have those areas set up to accomplish those. But I like to have things accessible. I don't like to hunt for things. I'd rather spend my time painting than hunting, so I keep them organized as I have them here. But this should just give you an idea of the equipment, the materials, the tools I use to accomplish my paintings. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to learn more about the specific material and equipment I use, you can go to my website, surowiczart.com, and there you'll find a detailed listing of all material and equipment that I use with links. So this is the home page, and if you click on the studio page, what you'll see first is a tour of my studio. There's a video tour of my studio. But if you scroll down, you'll see materials and equipment that I use in my painting process. So here's brushes, palette and paint, masking supplies, accessories, paper, studio equipment, framing and matting, some of my favorite reeds. And if you just click on the image, you'll find details, in this case, about my palette, what I use, the paints I use, the brands I use. There's a layout of in detail of my palette in a PDF format. And if you were to go back and click on brushes, you'll see kind of a menu of the brushes that I use, the sizes, and you can click on individual brushes and you can see specifically where I purchase the individual item. So if you want to learn more about the specifics, the details of the materials, the equipment that I use, again, you can go to my website, surowiczart.com. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of the workspace that I use. And if, like I said, if you want to learn more about the materials and equipment, you can go to my website, surowiczart.com, and go to my studio page. Thanks for watching.